Hi, my name is Jessica Nicely. I'm the founder of Winged Hope Family Advocacy Foundation, and I'm a survivor of child abuse. Since 2013, our organization has helped over 45,000 people with direct victim response and training.
Hi, my name is Caleb Mitchell. I'm a licensed professional counselor and owner of the Phoenix Counseling Collective, where we provide counseling for trauma victims from all walks of life. In this class, we're going to provide you knowledge to help protect children, your family, your organization, and your communities from child sexual abuse. You're taking this course because your organization understands that children are vulnerable, and it is crucial for us to know how abusers work, as well as the effects it has on the victims.
Child sexual abuse is rampant in our culture. It is a hard reality to face, but we must. Sexual abuse happens frequently and within some of our most trusted community organizations, such as churches, sports leagues, nonprofits, and even our homes. As you watch this course, certain aspects may feel uncomfortable. It may even bring up memories and strong emotions. If this happens, we recommend seeking help from a counselor or a trusted relationship. If you've been abused, please know that you are not alone in your suffering, and we've provided resources at the end to help you move toward healing.
We ask that you take your time with this course and pay close attention. The children in your life are depending on you, both to recognize the signs of abuse and to keep them safe. As a therapist who deals with this issue daily, I'm concerned with how unaware most people are at the widespread nature of abuse. Our number one goal is to equip you to protect the children in your community.
Before we begin, the primary objectives of this course are: identify common signs of sexual abuse, understand who abusers are and how they operate, protect children and your organization from common ways abusers groom their potential victims, create a culture of safety from abusers within your organization, and respond appropriately to a disclosure or if you suspect abuse. Abusers target organizations with children because they know these organizations provide easy access to potential victims. Many organizations struggle with maintaining an adequate number of volunteers and staff, making them less likely to properly screen and train people. Furthermore, they often believe that they know everyone, and thus assume that these types of tragedies would never happen to them. Those that do take measures to screen usually think a background check is enough. Sadly, it is not. Most abusers can operate for years without being added to a list of offenders that a background check would find. Research indicates that only 38% of child victims disclose the fact that they have been abused, and about half of these disclosures are made to a friend where no further action was taken. Child protective agencies investigate about 55% of reported incidents. Most incidents are never pursued further because there wasn't enough information. Arrests are made in only 29% of child sexual abuse cases, only 19% if the child is under 6. Finally, only 4 to 8% of child sexual abuse accusations are fabricated. The point is this: the overwhelming majority of abuse is hidden, unreported, and unconvicted.
All children need love and desire attention. Sexual abusers will exploit the natural tendency of children to be trusting and vulnerable. Because of this, all children are at risk. However, there are traits and circumstances that put some at an even higher risk. They are children who are without one or both of their parents, children in the care of emotionally distant or abusive people. Kids who have unmet emotional needs often look to meet those needs elsewhere. Children who seem socially disengaged in a group. Abusers will often look for children who are withdrawn and seem to have trouble fitting in. Finally, children with intellectual and developmental disabilities. They are a highly vulnerable group.
Children typically don't directly disclose abuse. Rather, they will show signals that you often need to interpret. You need to know and look for these signals. Some of the following will be upsetting, but knowing and recognizing them is not only our responsibility, but could also protect a child from further abuse. Here are 4 signals to be aware of. A noticeable and distinct change in sleeping patterns or an apparent spike in nightmares. A child who is typically quiet and studious suddenly becomes defiant and uncooperative, or a child who is typically outgoing and vivacious suddenly becomes secretive and withdrawn. A noticeable increase or sudden start of the inability to control the bladder and bowels. A child who displays overly sexualized behaviors or vocabulary. This does not mean a child can't have a healthy understanding of their bodies, reproductive parts, and sex. Rather, it means overt knowledge of sex, sexual behavior, and vocabulary that is not age appropriate. Consider this: many abusers expose children to pornography as a part of the grooming process.
Consider the signs we just outlined and be on the lookout in your communities. It's better to err on the side of caution because the long-term effects of abuse are devastating. Addiction, self-harm, eating disorders, and even suicide are all behaviors that can be traced back to childhood sexual abuse. Additionally, some people who grow up with untreated abuse trauma become abusers themselves.
The stakes are high. Don't let a sense of shame, discomfort, guilt, or rocking the boat stop you from taking action. By listening to your gut, paying attention to the signs, and intervening, you could be saving these children's lives.
Most people think that they could easily spot an abuser. The popular image is that of a creepy, shifty, unkempt person on the margins of society. This is a mistake. Think about it. Would you ever let a creepy guy be alone with your children? Of course not. But the truth is that abusers are often respected members of society, which means you will not be able to spot them at first sight. They are excellent at being nice, blending in and appearing normal. The most important thing to understand, though, is that they are typically not strangers. Only about 10% of victims are abused by strangers.
You might be thinking we're being overly alarmist. Of course, not everyone is an abuser, but abusers do come from all walks of life. Here are some real examples. Daniel Gajusek was a Nobel Prize-winning pediatrician. Marvin Sharp was an Olympic gymnastics coach who was named Coach of the Year. Oscar Figueroa was an elementary school principal. Steven Sittler is a Christian church youth leader.
A significant number of abuse cases are perpetrated by other children and teens. About 40% of abuse happens between peers. Most peer abusers are in a position of power over their victims. They may be bigger, older, smarter, more popular, or wealthier. And the same statistic holds true for peer abusers. Most children are abused by somebody they know. Children perpetrators typically don't have the resources and freedom to gain regular alone time with their victims. This means they're more likely to abuse in the moment of opportunity. Usually, child perpetrators are not as cautious and skilled as adult abusers, and thus can seem much more brazen when acting out abuse.
When it comes to peers, here's a few real-life examples of where and how abuse happens. Under tables in a busy classroom, behind trees and bushes at recess, on playground equipment. You should always have an open door policy for playdates and ensure that there are no blind spots on playground equipment. The place that you need to keep the closest eye on, though, is the bathrooms. So many cases I've worked happened in bathrooms. It's an essential policy to never let a child be alone with another adult or child in a bathroom.
We need to be careful not to dismiss and minimize these cases because it's just kids being kids. When a child experiences abuse at the hands of another child, the sense of helplessness and pain can impact them for the rest of their lives.
In this section, we'll take a closer look at how the typical abuser operates, at how they gain access, push boundaries, and maintain secrecy. This section will help give you a new set of eyes to view the world around you. When you begin to understand how abusers operate, you'll be better equipped to protect your community. Generally, there are 3 primary barriers that an abuser must overcome. The activity of skirting these barriers is called grooming. They are adult barriers, physical barriers, sexual barriers.
The first barrier that the abuser needs to overcome is you, the adult. They'll attempt to gain your trust so that you'll be more likely to give them alone time with the child. In 90% of all child sexual abuse cases that are reported to the police, the abuser already knew the child. It's critical to understand that as a human barrier, you as the adult are a target of grooming. They will groom you to trust them and not suspect anything. They'll make you think they are the last person who would ever abuse a child.
The second area that the abuser needs to push through is the natural physical boundaries of the child. This means normalizing touch and physical contact. Abusers want to be physically close. Keep an eye out for frequent and uncomfortable grabbing, tickling, offering piggyback rides, having children sit on their lap, and other physical touch activities. Go with your instincts. If it feels wrong, pay attention. If a child appears uncomfortable or requests for the behavior to stop and the person doesn't respond or concede, then you as an observing adult must intervene and say, "Listen to that child. She asked you to stop."
The third area of grooming is to normalize the victim to sexuality. Some common methods are showing them pornography, exposing themselves, asking the child to expose themselves, having conversations about sex and genitalia in an attempt to normalize it. Once a perpetrator has groomed the adults, broken down physical barriers surrounding the child, and normalized sexuality, the last step is to maintain privacy and silence.
More often than not, abusers need privacy and alone time to perpetrate, although there will be cases where abuse will happen when others are in close proximity. This is why so many perpetrators seek out careers that give them unquestioned access and authority. There are many ways abusers can find alone time, but here are some of the most common. Offering to babysit, taking the child on a special play date, counseling sessions, private coaching lessons, and offering to drive the child alone. The abuser's goal is to secure a victim for repeated abuse. To do so, they must create a secretive culture between them and their victim, wherein the victim maintains complete silence regarding their sexual activities. The primary ideas that abusers will impart to the child to keep them silent are disbelief. Nobody will believe you. After all, who would believe a child? Shame. You shouldn't do this to your family. If you tell somebody, your family will be ruined and it will be your fault. Threats. If you tell, then I will hurt you or somebody in your family. Because of these tactics, it can be painful and scary for a child to tell others what's happening to them. Children will often minimize or even recant after hinting at a disclosure.
So, if a child discloses abuse to you, the first thing you need to do, and don't underestimate this, is to believe them. Literally, look the child in the eyes and say the words, I believe you. Say this calmly and do not react emotionally. One of their greatest fears is that they will be in trouble or that they will get the abuser in trouble. If you overreact, the child disclosing may minimize or recant. So you need to be calm. Don't be reactive. Trust the child.
Your job is to believe the child. It is appropriate to ask the following questions. What happened? Who was involved? Where did this happen? And when did this happen? You are not the police officer, not the attorney, and not the caseworker. You may be angry, but you might do more harm to the future investigation if you do anything beyond your role as a provider of emotional support. If a child has trusted you with a disclosure, here's what you should do. Check your state's mandatory reporting laws and report accordingly. If you're with an organization, follow the child protection policy that is in place and seek out professional help on behalf of the child. There are organizations and groups that can help walk you through this process. At the end of this course, there will be a list with links to these organizations.
As a volunteer or staff member at your organization, you can personally help prevent child abuse. It needs to be a team effort where everyone commits to following a child protection policy and keeping a watchful eye for grooming behaviors and signs of abuse.
Thank you for taking the time to learn about this difficult subject and for not being afraid to face the reality of sexual abuse. My hope is that you will take what you learned today into your communities to help protect children.